if you are a publisher or the owner of a website. One day, when I was back in 1983, when I was working with Michael and his brothers, there was a battle at the Boston Herald-American. The Boston Herald-American was the second running newspaper in Boston. It ran second to the Boston Globe. The Boston Globe outsold it by 20,000 copies every day, no matter what they did. The Boston Herald-American had 9 Pulitzers, the Boston Globe had 36 Pulitzers, or something of the sort.
Yeah.
And one day the publisher walked into the Boston Herald-American's newsroom and said, "We're putting Michael Jackson on the cover tomorrow." And all of these journalists who regarded themselves as hard-nosed journalists turned on him and said, "We can't do that. We're not a celebrity rag. We're not a gossip supermarket tabloid." But he was the publisher, and he turned his back and went back up to his room. So they put Michael on the cover the next day. And remember, they undersold the Boston Globe by 20,000 papers every day.
Yeah, I see where this is going.
Yes, this day they outsold
Right.
the Boston Globe by 30,000 copies.
Right.
So the publisher came back down to the newsroom and pointed at one of the rock writers, rock critics,
Yeah.
and said, I'm giving you your own office. I'm giving you your own secretary. I want a Michael Jackson story every single day.
Right.
And guess what happened with the publisher of the Boston Globe? He came in and said the same thing. And that caught off all over the country.
So then we have a runaway media.
Right. And now positive
you
stories.
knew Michael.
Oh, I could not have felt the way I feel about Michael if it weren't for a couple of very intense encounters with him that revealed to me who he is. I mean, Nando, I collect souls. And so part of collecting souls is finding them. And Michael had the most remarkable soul. It was just so far beyond anything you imagine. Anything. And it's so far beyond anything you ever thought you even could imagine, that it resets the perceptual envelope. It resets the boundary of possibility for humanity, literally. And that's one of the things I have to get across in this book and in the PR campaign for this book. Because if you got somebody, in 1955, everybody knew that no one would ever break the 4-minute mile. It was a human impossibility. And then a guy named Roger Bannister pulled in a friend of his, and they started doing scientific analyses of how his ankles were moving, how his knees were moving when he was running, in order to maximize his efficiency.
He said the experience itself was somewhat effortless in retrospect.
That may be, because they've done a very good job of training and analysis preparation.
Yeah.
But the trick is, once he broke the 4-minute mile, everybody started breaking the 4-minute mile.
Yeah, right.
So Michael is one of those perceptual boundary expanders. If people get to know who and what he was the living incarnation of awe, wonder, surprise, and utter and complete love and commitment. If people get that, and I'm hoping they can get it through my book, it will have an impact for a long time to come, like Roger Bannister. I'm so glad to see that this has been a puddle that periodically turned into a lake. So at any rate, so we've got the film, which will presumably come out between now and the time the book comes out. There's another film that was shot after the birthday party, 2 days after the birthday party, called My Dinner with Howard. It's also a 70-minute documentary, and the filmmaker says, "Oh, why don't I make you a promo video for the book?" For free, yes.
So you will be talking about Michael Jackson. Now he was married to Elvis
Lisa
Presley. Yeah, Lisa Presley, who said he was basically normal in the sense that
he was very normal.
He was a normal guy.
There's another possible explanation.
Yeah.
And Michael never had a childhood. He was rehearsing and performing with his brothers from the time he was about 6 years old. Now remember the work
Joe holding the reins.
Right.
And
remember the work of Jaak Panksepp, who showed that if you take a bunch of mice and you deprive them of the ability to play with each other, which they naturally do as they're growing up, they suffer play deprivation, and when you finally let them in with a bunch of their peers, they will get in all that time they missed on playing. So Michael was suffering from childhood deprivation, and he loved his kids because he had all this childhood empathy in him waiting to be expressed somehow.
Interesting. That's sort of Elton John's explanation for his exuberant
That's
flamboyance.
That's very interesting.
He had a very rigid British, stiff upper lip kind of upbringing.
So at any rate, so what else is going on with me? I went down to Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama last month, May, and was placed at the foot, one of the power positions at a very long table of a 20-person conference room table.
Where I would expect you'd be.
Well, if these is a bunch of people who'd flown in from NASA, the National Science, the National Space Society.
Well, you were friends with Buzz Aldrin.
We've been friends for 15 years. So, and I listened very carefully, and then I distilled everything into a $2 billion moon program. We give $1 billion to the first company that lands a nice, comfy human habitation on the moon, and another $1 billion to the company that sets it up and runs it. That's it, the whole program. And there's a whole bunch of reasoning behind it. But, so, at the table was a 3-star general, General Steve Quast, and I've been thrown together with him for the last 4 years, and last year he sent an email out of the blue saying, "Howard, you are a peerless leader," which, Nando, when you get that from somebody whose whole business is leadership, whose whole life is leadership, it literally is physically shocking. So, so I boiled everything down to this simple program, the $2 billion moon program, and everybody was enthusiastic, and I tried to turn the project of turning this into a reality over to the general, and the general kept turning it back to me. So now I'm leading this $2 billion moon program.
Is this a speculative venture, or?
No, the idea is to get it enacted as policy by the government. And so to do that, I gave the general the assignment of getting to Mike Pence, and another person in the group put me together a few weeks ago in Washington with Newt Gingrich. We were knee to knee. The general was with me, and I thought he should take this power seat directly next to Newt. He wouldn't let that happen. He shoved me into that seat. So, so we really need to get to the White House. Well, guess where, I just ran our latest meeting yesterday. Guess where the general is going to be tomorrow? The White House. So we'll see what we can accomplish. Barbara Marx Hubbard is the queen, the godmother of the New Age movement. She came up with the term conscious evolution. She turned conscious evolution into a movement that's all over the world. She ran for vice president sometime in the 1970s. What was
her work, her book?
She has a bunch of books, and there's been at least one film made on her. And she's... Oh, and she also tried to buy a rocket from the Russians to land God knows what on the moon. This is a long time ago.
Wait, we're talking about the 70s?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Barbara is this magical person who senses the possibilities in combinations of people, and they happen. They flourish, in part because she's so fucking charismatic and such a good catalyst. So Barbara put me together with a guy named Mark Gaffney, and the three of us got together every Tuesday on the phone and did an hour of trialogue. She called it Co-Creating Genius. And that was all transcribed and put together for the sake of a book, and she negotiated a book contract with us. And then she went into the hospital. Now, if you asked her how old she was very proud of her age. she would tell you she was 90. She wasn't being completely honest. She hadn't quite reached 90 yet. She was 89. And she had the spirit and the energy of a 17-year-old. Any male that came anywhere near her would fall in love with her immediately. So she went in for minor surgery, and they put her under anesthesia, and she never came out.
Oh.
So
terrible.
Mark now and I have to try to complete that project ourselves.
Okay.
And I'm running a group that's putting together the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 13 landing, the very troubled mission that almost didn't make it back.
Yeah.
So we're doing that as a fundraiser in LA. And I'm working the real workhorse on this. I run the team, but the guy who really makes it possible is the actor Harry Hamlin, who first showed up on LA Law.
Oh yeah, right.
A long time ago.
Oh, this is beautiful.
Yep.
Wow, this is
And
Brooklyn.
if you listen,
hidden treasures of Brooklyn.
yes, if you listen, you'll hear somewhere along here a waterfall. Oh, look at the duck on that clotted surface. He's actually managing to get around. How extraordinary.
Is that algae?
The bird?
No. The what he's mucking around in.
God knows. And those plants are interesting that are sticking their great big elephant ear-like leaves out of the muck. So, aha, there's more. There's another one way over there.
Yeah.
So there's lots more happening. I generally do 15 projects simultaneously. And I can never remember more than 2 or 3 of them at the same time.
That's
I
great.
have to go look at my list
That's great.
to see what else it is. Because there are a bunch of other space projects. The head of acquisitions for the International Space Station asked to be hooked to me on LinkedIn. And I proposed an idea to her, and she liked it, and she put us with an organization called CASIS that is so exclusive that my friends at NASA had never gotten access to it. And now we had several people at CASIS who were jumping up and down about our projects. And it became 3 projects, and then it ground to a halt. So something new has happened, and we're going to meet, I think, a week from Saturday on the phone and see if it's time to bring that project back, or that set of projects back to life. And then Caltech, the Keck Institute for Space Studies, flew me out to Caltech twice to meet for 4 days or 3 days or something like that with this really extraordinary group of engineers, space engineers. And I put together, by taking an element from this guy, an element from that guy, an element from another guy, I put together something called the Multiplanetary Smart Tile, and I was running that project for 3 years. And then my key partner, who was at the Carnegie Mellon.
Was that an energy source?
This is an energy infrastructure for the solar system, is what we were looking at, and a cloud computing infrastructure for the solar system. So we were creating a simple module that you'd put up the way you put neurons in the brain, so that they weren't very smart by themselves. 100 of them were a little bit smarter. 100,000 were a whole lot smarter than that. So this is the doggy beach. The dogs have a wonderful time here. An absolutely wonderful time. This is Disneyland for dogs without the lines and the ticket prices.
Yeah, I feel like joining them.
Yeah, well, the only ticket price is bring your own ball. Yesterday there was a dog who was so glad that I was watching him, even though his owner was standing this far away from me, just kept bringing his stick back to me, which was very sweet of him. And sometimes he'd place it in between his owner and me to see who would get it, which one would throw it.
I remember a passage in the Lucifer Principle where you mentioned that the dog instinctively knows to look away.
Yes, perceptual shutdown.
When there's a pecking order in play.
Exactly.
And instead of engaging in some conflict, he's able to navigate that.
As if the other dog doesn't exist.
Yeah,
he's very good at pretending the other dog doesn't exist.
I noticed that I've done versions of that myself on both ends of that equation.
So, okay, we better get you back to your car at a reasonable hour.
Great. Okay.